Hi friends, welcome back. So, headline: the IRS reveals your 2025 tax brackets as Trump's tax cuts are set to expire. I want to go over what the brackets are. Also, want to talk about with you what's the difference between Harris and Trump and their tax plans. And let's just jump right in. So, this is coming from Market Watch. They have it organized pretty well, and you're probably going to see this all over the news today. Your standard deduction is going up. So, for individuals, it'll go to 15,000. That's up from 14,600. For married couples, this is your standard deduction. It's going to go to 30,000, and that's up from 29,200. And then people who file head of household, your standard deduction is going to go up to 22,500, and that's up from 21,900. So it says here about 9 out of 10 people who file individual taxes take the standard deduction. You guys can let me know what you take. The brackets it breaks down into the low end for tax brackets is 10%. The high end is 37%. We have an international community who watches this channel, so I'd love to hear like what the brackets are in your country. I'd be really curious on that and how it compares. Now, I want to state very clearly though, whenever you talk about taxes, it is very convoluted in USA. So I just showed you single filing. This is married because you're also talking about federal. Then you have state taxes, right? So that's a whole other ball of wax depending on which state that you are in. And then you also have, ways of taxing people that isn't necessarily tied to income tax, be it wealth tax or consumption taxes, right? A lot of different things. So this is married, file jointly. So don't think this is the only taxes that you pay in the USA. This is just some of the tax you pay in the USA based on income. This is at a household end. So again, the low bracket is 10%. The high bracket is 37%. I want to state clearly, I'm 49. You guys may not know this. I know I mention my age from time to time, but the older you get, you'll start doing it too. And when I was young, I was like, why people talk about their age? But it's just because you've seen a lot of things. And I'm mentioning Steve Forbes because when I was a kid, I remember Steve Forbes. He ran for president. I think it was like in the 90s. I can't remember exactly year. Maybe it was 96 or something like that. And you guys can remind me on that. But I remember very clearly he was just like, hey, I'm going to turn all our taxes and it's going to fit on a postcard and simplify everything and you just mail it into the IRS. And, when I was a kid, I didn't have really much understanding of this stuff because I'm a kid, who knows? But it kind of like that kind of logic kind of made sense. Oh, okay, let's make it more simple. Like, why are we, messing with this stuff? The thing is, though, why it's a bit disingenuous and why I'm bringing this up is because for many people, they have ways to restructure their taxes. Essentially, why you hire a CPA, essentially an accountant to figure out ways to tax shelter yourself, et cetera. That's what our system is all about. And in this situation, if he says, hey, the best way to do taxes is everyone pays the same percentage. Well, what if you have no income, right? And the example I would use is Musk. You could talk about, Jeff Bezos, these kind of people. But Musk is an interesting situation because essentially he takes no income from Tesla, right? So he doesn't pay income tax. But he has tons of stock options, right? Tons of stock, this kind of stuff. And essentially what he does then is talking about Musk, is he takes out a bunch of loans using the stock as collateral. And then he's able to live that way and essentially avoid taxes. Now, he pays taxes in other ways, but I'm just saying this is sort of why when you talk about income tax in the USA, it's a bit disingenuous because there's lots of other types of incomes out. Well, how about that? Lots of other ways of having money out there. That's a good way to say it. And so essentially when you talk about this flat tax stuff, like to the average voter who doesn't have a lot of assets, they're like, oh, well, it should be fair that everyone, pays the same income tax. But again, depending on how much, money you have and et cetera, you can find ways to essentially not have any income. And then you're not paying tax on your income, but obviously you still have money. So in the Musk situation, if you understand this, he has a bunch of loans based on his assets. One of the things that is difficult out there, and I understand this in the internet these days, it's hard to get good info on what's the difference between Trump and Harris. And there's just a lot of stuff on social media that's frankly untrue. I just like to throw this stuff out there with you guys and let you guys be the judge and try what I do my best is I say, hey, this is what the stuff is, and then I give you my opinion. So this is Harris tax breaks or tax proposal, I guess you could say. One thing that's interesting is that as the headline said that Trump's tax cuts are set to expire. It looks like both Trump and Harris actually want to extend those cuts, so that may be the norm. But Harris doesn't want to do it quite as much. Trump wants to make them permanent. So the big difference here is, and I'll just read through this stuff. It says Harris wants to extend the Trump's 2017 tax cuts for Americans making less than $400,000 a year, right? So basically, If you make under 400,000, she wants to keep taxes the way they are. If you make over 400,000, you'll probably end up paying more, right? So that's income tax, right? Be aware of that. She wants to expand the child tax credit to 3,600 from 2,000 and provide 6,000 for households with kids under 1 year old. The reason why you have to mention all of these other things, like you can't just look at brackets, because the way the U.S. system works is you can give all kinds of incentives for all kinds of things, right? So it becomes very, very convoluted. So then I start to sound like, oh, well, maybe C4's plan isn't so bad. But again, this is just the U.S. tax system. Also, too, she's saying here, exempt tip wages from income taxes, but not payroll taxes. Okay. Again, this is Harris. Expand the earned income tax credit. Also wants to make permanent the enhanced affordable care tax credits. Harris also is increased low income housing tax credit. So make it, try to help people with getting their first time home. That's also here. Provide first time home buyer down payment credit of $25,000. Also, you have a provide new tax credit for home construction and rehabilitation. And you have this increased startup expense tax deduction to $50,000 from $5,000. So these are the different things that she's proposing when she said it. This article came out about a week ago. So this is pretty current information. Let me talk about Trump. So again, we're talking about taxes. Trump wants to make permanent his 2017 tax cuts, which expire next year. So this alone, if you make over 400,000, would probably benefit you in regards to taxes, right? We're just talking about taxes because there's lots of other things you can talk about. Trump also says he wants to end tax on tipped wages, end tax on Social Security benefits. Okay, so we're talking about quite a lot of tax cuts actually. Raise child tax credit to $5,000 from $2,000. So it looks like they're pretty similar that way. Provide tax deduction for major newborn expenses. Proposes Trump floating the free in vitro fertilization. Okay, interesting. I say that's interesting because I think some Republicans are against in vitro. It depends which type of Republican that you ask. There are different groups out there. Cut corporate taxes. So this isn't mentioned in the Harris one, but Trump wants to do it. Cut corporate taxes to 15% from 21%, but only for companies that make their products in the USA. I'll show you some charts on this stuff, but I can just tell you that this is relatively low, meaning 50 if you cut it to 50% compared to other countries around the world. Trump also wants to end tax and overtime pay, end his 2017 taxes law, $10,000 cap for deductions of state and local taxes, and double taxation for Americans living abroad. So that would affect me actually. Provide tax deduction for total cost of home generators bought. Oh, home generator, that's interesting. I didn't know he was talking about that. That's interesting. So home generator tax credit, I guess, basically, or tax deduction, as it says here. And then you have provide tax deduction for interest on car loans. That's interesting. So it's funny, when I was just talking out loud with you guys, I wonder if Musk is involved with this home generator stuff in some way, and also the interest on car loans tax deduction. So you can see Trump's offering you a lot more tax stuff. One thing I want to mention with this tax stuff is that that's the sort of where it gets complicated. So Trump is saying, hey, I will lower your taxes on your income, but I'm going to raise your taxes via consumption. So essentially Trump's saying, the way we're going to try to get more tax revenue is through a bunch of tariffs, which is consumption tax. And that usually ends up hurting the lower rungs of the economic system, meaning that if you're more poor, you will have more inflation. Well, we all get more inflation, but the poor people will be affected by inflation more. And then the IMF just came out with this recently that essentially growth would go down under Trump. One of the things that I know is sensitive with this stuff is like, for a lot of people who like Mr. Trump, they don't understand this stuff. And I laugh and I try my best to explain it, but it's like, I don't know. And then I've come to the realization that for some people it may be a lost cause. So whatever, I'll just tell you guys what it is and you can make up your own mind. But it says here, greater global protectionism will endanger the world's growth outlook. The IMF has warned as possible Donald Trump victory in the next months. U.S. election raises prospect of sharp tariff increases, right? So he's talking about raising tariffs. In the latest forecast, just 2 weeks before the presidential vote, the fund said it would expect the world economy to expand at 3.2% this year and next. Now it says here, but its World Economic Outlook cautioned that if higher tariffs, so that would be under Trump, hit a sizable swath of world trade by mid-2025, it would wipe 0.8% from economic output next year and 1.3% in 2026. So IMF is saying, hey, we're going to slow down if Trump tariffs come into effect. Our major problem here is and see, I can bring up this here, is that, I understand that tax cuts are attractive for many people. Guys, I get it. I pay taxes, you pay taxes, we all pay taxes in different ways. And, it's not fun. I totally get that. The problem that we have in the USA, and it's not just USA, it's several countries around the world, is it just the perfectly frank, we have too many old people compared to how many workers there are. It's going to be an increasing problem, and this is a major issue. So you have a couple of things: is you could either raise taxes to try to balance out the system, or you could cut benefits. I'm sure there's lots of different ways you can do one of those two things. But if you want to balance the thing, I mean, the other thing you could do, and this is essentially both Harris and Trump, is that you just keep borrowing more money and we go into deficit spending. Trump's deficit spending is going to be more than Harris's, but they're both going to be deficit spending. This article just came out just a couple days ago. It's on CNBC. Headline: Trump tax plan could exempt 93 million Americans from income taxes. If you think about that, it's like a little bit less than a third of Americans would not pay income tax. If it sounds crazy, you're right. So it's not that. I mean, you got to have a system that's sustainable. And there's another headline, and I understand again, and I always have to talk about this stuff because I know a lot of people get really upset when you show these numbers, but it's just I keep seeing it just based on numbers everywhere. Trump plan would make Social Security insolvent in just 6 years. Just not bringing in enough money for the commitments for the government. And essentially what you're looking at, and this is part of why you need to save and invest, right? And it depends on your perspective on these things. So for some people, they say, well, I can manage my money better than the government can. Just, cut everything. I don't need schools. I don't need hospitals. I don't need roads. I don't need anything. Just give me, a bunch of money. And it depends what kind of society you want to live in. The problem with this stuff is, guys, and this is, we can go back here, whatever headline you want to look at. But the problem with this stuff is that there's a lot of people out there that just frankly are really, really struggling, and they actually benefit from, say, something like a public transportation or the post office or having a road that works or, any number of things. But this is also true. The U.S. system is a system to where the way that it's kind of been going is that you're basically on your own and got to fend for yourself. So, whether or not that's good or bad, I'll let you guys be the judge of that. My opinion on this stuff is you have to deal with the world that you live in, and the current world that we live in, I just wouldn't count on Social Security. Just be honest with you, I wouldn't count on it being in the form that it is now. So essentially, that's why you need to be saving, investing, right? So do what makes sense for you, right? Pay off your debts and buy some index funds, buy some treasuries, these kind of things. I always mention CDs, so I don't think they're bad because essentially it's just like, hey, guaranteed returns if you want, and use those as cash reserves essentially, or savings accounts, depending on which gives you a better return. And everyone's going to be different in your neck of the woods. The thing is that I talk with you about this stuff, and it's difficult to talk about because some people, they haven't planned for retirement at all, haven't planned for their future, or they do try to plan, but it's just really, really difficult because they don't have enough money coming in, and so they feel like they're getting underwater every year. Guys, I really understand. The cost of food goes up, cost of energy goes up, your rents go up, your mortgages, et cetera, your insurance costs go up. It just seems like, unfathomable. And you're just like, I just, need more money in my pocket, hence tax cuts. The thing is with this stuff, and I know it's complicated if you haven't lived outside the USA because you don't know a different system. I'll just give you an example. I live here in Korea. I can just tell you the cost of healthcare is much, much less than USA. So even if, say, in the USA, for example, let's say someone comes and gives you a bunch of tax cuts, but if you have to pay a bunch more money for your medical costs, you may not necessarily be in great shape overall, right? And that's debatable. Everything depends on your neck of the woods, right? And this is certainly, I'm fine having these conversations. I'm just sharing my experiences with you. Here in Korea, our healthcare is better than USA by far. It's cheaper and better. Now, our system is not perfect, and in fact, we're having major problems right now because the current administration here in Korea wants to start to turn our healthcare system more into a for-profit system. So there's a lot of issues with that, of course, I'm sure you understand, and they'll make lots of different arguments. And it's a long conversation, but I'll just say this is that um, whatever system that we go with, right, either Harris or Trump or whatever, this is just one part of things you got to deal with in your life. And whatever, whoever wins, I always say the same thing. Just, hey, that's who won. Accept it, deal with it, take care of yourself, right? Don't plan on the government helping you in USA. It's just how our system is. It's a system to where there are essentially winners and losers. That's part of how the system works. And you want to be on the winning side. It's just the reality of it. I can't stress over, who's going to win or lose. I don't know. We're going to find out in a couple of weeks, but regardless, it looks like to me they're both proposing trying to extend the Trump tax cuts. That's what it looks like to me. I'm literally looking at their plans. So, and then the other issue is like, are we cutting too much or are we raising too much? And that's debatable, but the overriding issue though is that we have some real demographic problems in the USA, essentially just too many old people. Now the USA, and I don't mean the sense of like I hate old people, not saying that, just the system is difficult because we don't have enough workers to support said old people. Now the US is a little bit different than other countries because there's more immigration, so that brings in more workers into the system compared to say a place like Japan or here in Korea. We just have a much less immigration. That might be all through Asia, actually, less immigration. I can't speak to Europe, and I know that's sensitive topics in Europe. But one thing I will say, like if you take a look at the UK, take a look at what happened after Brexit, essentially cutting off immigration and what happened to their economy, et cetera. And again, these are sensitive topics, and everyone's going to have a different experience, and it all depends on your neck of the woods. I'd like to hear your thoughts on any one of these topics that we talk about. And again, I encourage you to take a look at this stuff for yourself. This is stuff that Harris is proposing regarding to tax breaks. I'll just throw up on screen. You can pause it and take a look. This is what Trump's proposing. There's so much in here that it's hard to talk about each individual one. My main concern, though, is this, that we have a system that makes sense, that's balanced, essentially, not skewed one way, more to one way or the other. I will say though, whatever these people propose, it's still got to get through Congress, right? And then also, this is something that just don't count on any of these things happening. Mostly focus on taking care of yourself and just building up wealth so that you're okay. Because like I said, I wouldn't count on Social Security being in the same state that it is now. It's just a numbers game. I don't think it's sustainable. And that's how it is. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on any of these things, and I'll catch you on the next video.